bananas, mulberries, tomatoes, a drip irrigation system for your fruit trees, and a lot more in today's episode of California Gardening. Today's episode is divided into 4 sections. We will begin with the garden tour. We will look at the harvest we made this month. We'll look at what's growing in the California garden this month, and then we'll have some things for you to do in your garden. So let's begin with the garden tour. Our garden is in Southern California in the city of Irvine, Zone 10, and it's been pretty warm to pretty hot here in Southern California. And I will be on vacation next month in the month of June, so I'm trying to automate as many tasks as possible for my garden, like watering and some other things. In the garden tour, for the first bed, we have some onions growing. These are the spring onions, followed by some pepper plants and some more onions. These are the large onions. The bulbs are growing now, and it's been a while since they've been growing, so I'm waiting to harvest them. Followed by the tomato jungle here. The tomato plants have grown really well in the last month, and you can see here there are some tomatoes growing as well already, and this is a great season to grow tomatoes. Your tomato plant should be well established by this time. And the okras have germinated and are growing very slowly, though. I'm not very happy with the progress of my okra this season. And moving on to the next side, we have some more tomato plants. The plant that you see here right now is the San Marzano with some fruits growing as well. We have some asparagus beans plants that will grow on this trellis right here. I just set up this trellis with some rebars and some wire. We have taro root plants and the sweet potato plant that grew out of the compost bin. And I have some more pepper plants here, different varieties of peppers that are growing in this raised bed. We have some more onions on the other side. These are again the large bulbing type onions. And finally we have our eggplants. If you remember these eggplants, these were overwintered from last year, and they've been growing pretty well and producing a lot of eggplants, as you can see here. So these 2-year-old eggplants are pretty strong, and that completes the tour of our garden. Now let's look at the containers that we have. We have some lemongrass, we have mint growing here. This is the sweet mint from Israel. And we have a couple of strawberry varieties. Now I didn't label these varieties, but these are either the Sequoia or the Chandler variety. Followed by one more pineapple plant, and hopefully that grows well as the season gets warmer. And some more strawberry plants. And on the corner you see the Meyer lemon plant. It's quite dwarfed by this huge curry leaf tree in the spot. And we are also growing a couple of tomato plants in this container. In fact, the tomatoes have started forming and this plant is actually falling down, as you can see. You see these tomatoes being formed here. This is the big boy variety of tomato, and it's growing pretty well. Followed by the other mulberry tree we have 2 mulberry trees growing. This is the other one, and you'll see the other one very soon in the harvest section. We have one more tomato plant. This is the San Marzano. Once again already fruiting in this container. This is a 7-gallon container, the 16-inch container. Followed by some more peppers. These peppers have also been overwintered from last year. We grew this pepper plant last year and then overwintered it to this year. And finally we have one more curry leaf plant in the corner, as you can see here. So that completes the tour of the container garden, and we have one more section to cover for containers. And those are the containers which are on the side of the raised beds, which are these. We have a pineapple plant growing here, followed by some onions. These are again the large bulbing onions growing in a whiskey barrel container, and followed by some cherry tomatoes, as you can see here, that have been fruiting very well and growing pretty well. And these hot days you need to make sure that they are well watered, all these tomato plants that you see, And I do have the drip irrigation line for all these containers. And these are the Jupiter peppers, the pepper varieties I'm growing for the first time this year. And we did harvest some peppers. As you can see here, lots of peppers growing in this plant. And it's a good pepper variety to grow. And finally, we have our kale. The kale plants have been growing pretty well. We haven't been harvesting a lot of kale, but so far it looks good. So those are the containers we have on the other side just before the raised bed. And that concludes the tour of all these containers, and I hope you like the container garden tour. Let me know what you think. And moving on to the harvest sections, we harvested cabbage. We harvested a lot of cabbage this season. And as you know, we grew our cabbages in the spring season. And this is the round Dutch variety of cabbage that grew very well. As you can see here, large firm heads. And the only problem with cabbage is that of slugs. So as long as you use a slug repellent, you should be able to harvest very good quality cabbage in your garden. And now let's look at the chili peppers harvest. This is the one that we overwintered from last year and which is growing very well. This is the hot chili pepper variety. And as you can see here, it's producing very good pods. And this chili pepper variety, a variety that was given by one of my friends. And I'm growing this in this container and I'm pretty happy with the results. The Jupiter peppers have also been yielding some good quality peppers, as you can see here. This pepper is a little small, but we eventually harvested some more peppers from this plant which were pretty decently sized. Now once again, when you're growing at home, don't expect very large sized harvest from your plants because it's still way better than what you get at the grocery store. They're fresh, they're nice, and they're homegrown produce. Now let's look at eggplants. The overwintered eggplants have been doing very well so far. As you can see here, we are harvesting some nice eggplants here, medium to large sized. Some of them a little small as well, but that's okay because they are very flavorful when they are of this size. And this eggplant variety has yielded a lot of eggplants, so I'm pretty happy with the way they've grown. And these have been growing on the raised bed and I've been yielding a lot of eggplants for the second year now. And moving on to the garlic harvest, we had these garlic bulbs growing in this whiskey barrel container, which is a pretty good way to grow garlic, by the way. If you're planning to grow garlic, all you need to do is just have this one whiskey barrel container with a wide area and just plant your garlic bulbs. And as you can see here, we harvested our garlic and we are washing them. I usually like to wash my garlic and then just dry it a little bit before I store it. So I'm just going to sun dry it for about 30 minutes or so. And then once that is done, what I'm going to do is just tie them together and then keep them in a well ventilated area and keep them open and let them cure. Now let's move on to mint. We did have a lot of mint that we harvested. We're growing a lot of varieties of mint in containers, and I hope you've seen my video on growing mint. I've covered all aspects of growing mint in that video. And to harvest mint, all you do is just trim the leaves, and once in a while you should just trim all your leaves and stems from your mint plant so that the plant comes back and grows very healthy and gives you fresh leaves. Now I know a lot of people who have problem with their mint plants where they see diseased leaves or leaves that are not really growing very well. And for them, what I would advise is just make sure you trim your plant completely once at least every season. And a spring or the summer time is a good time to do it. And then let the plant grow back with new leaves. And that'll give you really good quality mint. And one more thing you can do is add some fertilizer to your mint plant, some liquid fertilizer during this time or some compost tea. And that way you will get very good quality mint from your plants. And now let's move on to mulberry, which is very interesting. We got some mulberries on our tree And as you can see here, these berries are pretty small, but they are absolutely delicious. So it's a great fruit in my experience. The green onions that we were growing in our raised bed are now yielding a lot of onion greens. And as you can see here, we are harvesting these greens. These onion leaves can be harvested right through the growing season, and they are very flavorful and they're very tender at this stage. So good time to harvest your onion leaves while the bulbs grow. And eventually this bulb will grow to a medium size because these are the spring onions, and once the bulbs grow we can harvest them as well. And then moving on to our strawberry harvest, we have been growing these strawberries in our small containers. These are the 12-inch containers, and as you can see here, that's enough to grow a couple of strawberry plants. And as you can see here, these strawberries just hang out from the sides and then you just harvest them. And homegrown strawberries are just so delicious. If you have kids at home, they just love to harvest these strawberries and eat them. Moving on to tomatoes, we finally harvested our first batch of tomatoes, and these are the yellow honey gold tomato variety, and we harvested a few of these tomatoes from the ones growing in the container. We also harvested some cherry tomatoes. As you can see here, these are the cherry tomatoes and they were growing very well, and we were able to harvest them as well. And now let's look at what's growing in the garden this month. We have grapes growing. This is the flame seedless variety of grapes, and as you can see here, it's growing very well on this trellis that you see here and producing these large clusters of grapes. And in this season it will keep growing and producing larger bunches of grapes. As you can see here, they're all hanging down from this support, and it's a pretty sight, and they'll be ready to harvest once they turn red. The pineapple plant is growing very well and producing side shoots despite the frost. The Rajapuri dwarf banana is now producing flowers as well as bananas, and as you can see here, this is a great dwarf banana variety to grow at home, and is something that I would recommend if you don't have a lot of space or even otherwise. This is a wonderful banana variety that grows to about 5 feet or so, maybe around 6 feet. And we are harvesting the banana flower here, and as you can see, the bananas have been produced, and what happens now is the flower just continues, or the bud just continues to hang from there. So it's better if you harvest the bud and the flowers, and you can eat them. They're very edible. The flowers are very delicious, and what remains after that are the bananas, which will continue to become big and then continue to ripen after that. Now let's look at the tomatoes that are growing. We do have a lot of varieties of tomatoes this season that we planted, and as you can see here, we have some in the container as well. So we have different tomato varieties in containers as well as in raised beds. You can see here some of the fruits are being formed as well, and we did harvest some cherry tomatoes this season. So about 5 tomato plants in a 4x4 raised bed is pretty ideal. Here you can see some more tomatoes being formed, and tomatoes will form fruits if the temperatures are not too high. So currently the temperatures are pretty ideal for growing tomatoes. And this was the one in the whiskey barrel container, 1 plant per whiskey barrel. And now let's look at the things to do in your garden this month. The first thing we did is we set up the drip irrigation system for our trees. I didn't want to take a chance and let any of the trees die. So I set up a drip irrigation system for all the fruit trees. As you can see here, we have about 45 feet of area to cover, and I will show you how I managed to do that. So the first thing was to use an existing sprinkler line that we already had, and then use a Rainbird retrofit system for a sprinkler system that already exists. And what I'm doing is I'm just taking an elbow to take the PVC pipe to one side so that I avoid the roots of some plants, and then I'm attaching the retrofit assembly to the top. And once that is done, you will have your retrofit, as you can see here, which brings out two main lines of half-inch tubing. And this half-inch tubing can be laid across the entire length of your fruit trees and that go into this retrofit assembly. So it's pretty simple. You just attach the main line and then you attach the 1/4-inch tubing and emitters. As you can see here, I have many videos where I've detailed how this works. And as you can see here, there are two emitters. The fan bubbler actually sprays out more water than the other emitter. And this is the other way to set up the drip irrigation for your fruit trees. What I'm doing here is I'm using this manifold which connects to a sprinkler line, and then the emitter is connected via 1/4-inch tubing to this manifold. So whatever way you do it, you should set up drip irrigation. I have set up drip irrigation for my containers as well. This is in my front yard. Now, pruning is another important activity to do in your garden this month. Our moringa trees have grown pretty large and we're going to be pruning our moringa tree. As you can see here, it's producing these small, long branches, and by pruning them, you make sure that they grow in a more bushy fashion. Don't be afraid to prune your curry leaf plant as well. We are pruning this small plant so that it grows in a more bushy way. And tomatoes, they need to be pruned as well, especially if you're growing them in the ground or raised beds. And this is completely optional. I'm just showing you how to prune the suckers that come out of the tomato plant, and it's a good thing to do this month in your garden. So there we have it, folks. That was our episode on the California garden for the month of May. And I'm not going to be here next month. I will be on vacation. So happy gardening and we'll see you soon.